But Michael Murphy was not done. In an act of superhuman will, he reached out, grabbed the phone, and pulled himself back up into a sitting position on the rock, completely exposed to the enemy fire that was still raining down on him. He was bleeding out. His body was failing. But his mission was not complete. He calmly, professionally, made the call. He identified himself. He gave their location. He reported that they were under heavy attack and taking casualties. He requested immediate assistance. His final words, spoken calmly and clearly amidst the chaos of battle and the agony of his own mortal wounds, were, "Thank you, sir." He ended the call. He picked up his rifle. And he continued to engage the enemy until his last breath, fighting to protect his men even as his own life ebbed away. Murphy's call got through. The TOC at Bagram immediately mobilized a massive Quick Reaction Force, QRF. Within minutes, two MH-47 Chinook helicopters from the Army's 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, loaded with 8 Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 10 and 8 Army Night Stalkers, lifted off from Bagram. They were escorted by 2 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters and 2 MH-60 Black Hawks. They flew at top speed towards the Sotelo Sar Mountain, a rescue force hammering through the sky, desperate to reach their brothers. As the lead Chinook, callsign Turbine 33, carrying the rescue team, approached the landing zone near the SEALs' position, it flew directly into a preset ambush. The Taliban fighters on the ridges, anticipating a rescue attempt, were waiting with RPGs. An RPG gunner fired from a concealed position on a nearby slope. The rocket struck the rear rotor pylon of the massive Chinook. The explosion was catastrophic. The helicopter lost control, spun violently, and crashed down the mountainside, erupting in a massive fireball. All 16 men on board, 8 SEALs and 8 Army aviators, were killed instantly. It was the single worst loss of life in Navy SEAL history up to that point, and the worst single-day loss of life for U.S. forces in Afghanistan since the start of the war. The rescue mission had turned into another tragedy. The surviving members of Murphy's team, Luttrell and Axelson, Dietz had likely succumbed to his wounds by this point, were now truly alone, their last hope gone up in flames. The battle continued for a short while after the crash, but the Taliban fighters, having destroyed the helicopter and believing they had wiped out the SEAL team, began to disperse. Axelson, despite his horrific head wound, had continued to fight until he ran out of ammunition, eventually succumbing to his injuries. Dietz was dead. Murphy was dead. Marcus Luttrell was the only one left. He was badly injured, with a broken back, shrapnel wounds, and severe dehydration. He was alone in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies, with no hope of immediate rescue. What followed was an incredible odyssey of survival. Luttrell managed to crawl away from the battle site, moving through the night, desperate to find water and cover. The next day, he was discovered by local villagers from the nearby village of Taliban. In another twist of fate, these villagers were Pashtun who adhered to the ancient code of Pashtunwali, which demands that hospitality and protection be given to anyone who asks for it, even an enemy. The village elder, Muhammad Gulab, took Luttrell in. Despite the immense risk to himself, his family, and his village, Gulab protected Luttrell from the Taliban fighters who came looking for him. He provided him with food, water, and medical care. He refused to give him up, even when threatened with death. For 5 days, Luttrell was hidden in the village, constantly moved from house to house to avoid detection. Gulab sent a messenger to the nearest U.S. base with a note written by Luttrell, alerting them to his location. Finally, on July 2nd, a massive U.S. Army Ranger and Special Forces operation was launched to rescue Luttrell. He was successfully extracted from the village, the lone survivor of Operation Red Wings. The cost of Operation Red Wings was devastating. 11 Navy SEALs and 8 Army Night Stalkers were killed. 19 of America's finest warriors lost in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. The mission to capture or kill Ahmad Shah was a failure in its immediate tactical goals. Shah survived the battle, though he was later killed in a separate operation in 2008. But the legacy of Operation Red Wings, and particularly the sacrifice of Lieutenant Michael Murphy, transcends tactical success or failure. It is a legacy of courage, honor, and the unbreakable bond of brotherhood. For his selfless act on the mountain, Lieutenant Michael Murphy was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. He was the first U.S. Navy sailor to receive the award since the Vietnam War. His citation reads, in part, "While being engaged by intense enemy fire, and with complete disregard for his own life, Lieutenant Murphy moved into the open, where he could gain a better position to transmit a call for help. Though severely wounded, Lieutenant Murphy maintained his exposed position to complete the call and continued to engage the enemy until mortally wounded." The USS Michael Murphy, DDG-112, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, was named in his honor. His high school in Patchogue, New York, was renamed after him. A Navy SEAL museum and a post office also bear his name. Matthew Axelson and Danny Dietz were posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, the Navy's second highest award for valor. Marcus Luttrell was also awarded the Navy Cross for his actions during the battle and his subsequent survival. Their story, immortalized in Marcus Luttrell's best-selling book, Lone Survivor, and the subsequent film, has become a touchstone for military values. It is a story taught to every new generation of SEALs, a powerful reminder of the standards they are expected to uphold. It is a story about the brutal reality of war, where best-laid plans can go horribly wrong, where the enemy gets a vote, and where survival often comes down to luck and sheer willpower. But above all, it is a story about choices. The choice to follow rules of engagement even when it puts you at risk. The choice to fight for your brothers when all hope is lost. And the ultimate choice, made by Michael Murphy, to lay down his life so that others might live. On that lonely, unforgiving mountain in Afghanistan, Michael Murphy didn't just make a radio call. He sent a message to the world about what it means to be a leader, a warrior, and a hero. His final act was not a tragedy, but a triumph of the human spirit. As the herders scrambled down the mountain, the SEALs knew their time was up. They immediately abandoned their position and began to move, trying to find a new, defensible location, trying to put distance between themselves and the inevitable response. But the damage was done. The clock was ticking, and the mountain was about to erupt. The response was swifter and more overwhelming than they could have imagined. Within an hour, the herders had alerted Shah's forces. The Taliban, intimately familiar with the terrain and numbering between 50 and over 100 fighters, estimates vary, but they vastly outnumbered the four SEALs, quickly mobilized. They were armed with AK-47 assault rifles, PKM light machine guns, and RPG-7 rocket-propelled grenades. They had the high ground, they had the numbers, and they had the element of surprise. The first signs of the attack were subtle: movement on the ridges above, the glint of sunlight on a rifle barrel. Then, all hell broke loose. A barrage of RPGs and heavy machine gun fire tore into the SEALs' new position. The air filled with the deafening roar of explosions, the crack of supersonic bullets, and the screams of men. Rocks and dirt were thrown into the air. The SEALs were immediately pinned down, taking fire from three sides. They returned fire instantly, their training kicking in. Murphy, Axelson, and Luttrell engaged targets with their M4 carbines and Mk12 sniper rifles, dropping fighters with precise, disciplined shots. Dietz, manning the rear security, fought off attempts to flank their position. They were a lethal, cohesive unit, moving, communicating, and fighting with an intensity that initially stunned the attackers. But the tactical situation was dire. They were exposed on a steep slope, with limited cover. The Taliban fighters, using the terrain to their advantage, were pouring a staggering volume of fire down upon them. They were maneuvering, trying to flank and encircle the small team. The SEALs were forced to give ground, fighting a desperate, rolling retreat down the mountainside. They bounded from rock to rock, covering each other's movement, firing, reloading, moving again. It was a brutal, exhausting dance of death. Every time they stopped, the enemy fire intensified. Every time they moved, they were exposed. Whatever they were shooting at us, they were hitting, Luttrell would later recall. The rounds were impacting all around them, kicking up shale, splintering rocks. They were taking hits to their gear, their body armor. It was only a matter of time before the wounds became critical. The battle raged for hours. It was a relentless, grinding fight for survival. The SEALs were pushing themselves beyond the limits of human endurance. Their ammunition was running low. Their bodies were battered and bruised from falling down the steep, rocky slopes. And they were beginning to take serious wounds. Danny Dietz, the communications man, was hit multiple times. He took rounds in his shoulder, his neck, and his hand. Yet, he continued to fight, firing his weapon with his offhand, refusing to give up. He continued to try and establish communication with headquarters, his blood slick on the radio handset, his voice weak but determined. He was a warrior to the end, fighting through unimaginable pain, his dedication to his teammates never wavering. Matt Axelson was shot in the chest. The round was stopped by his body armor, but the impact was like being hit with a sledgehammer, knocking the wind out of him and bruising his ribs. He, too, continued to fight, his focus never wavering, his sniper rifle taking a deadly toll on the enemy. Later, he would take a devastating head wound that would have incapacitated a lesser man, yet he continued to engage the enemy, covering his teammates' movement until the very end. Murphy was hit in the stomach early in the fight. It was a painful, debilitating wound. But he ignored it, refusing to let it slow him down. He continued to lead his men, directing their fire, calling out targets, making tactical decisions under the most extreme duress. He was the anchor, the calm center of the storm, his leadership a beacon for his beleaguered team. Marcus Luttrell was blasted over a ridge by an RPG explosion, tumbling down the mountainside, breaking several vertebrae in his back and suffering shrapnel wounds to his legs. He, too, fought on, his body screaming in pain, his resolve unbreakable. They were fighting a losing battle, and they knew it. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. The terrain was against them. The enemy was relentless. But they were SEALs. They would not quit. They would not surrender. They would fight until the last round, until the last breath. As the afternoon wore on, the situation became critical. They were backed into a deep ravine, surrounded on three sides. The enemy fire was plunging down on them from the high ground, a deadly rain of lead and explosives. They were taking heavy casualties. They were running out of ammo. They were about to be overrun. They needed air support. They needed an extraction. They needed a miracle. But the radio was their only lifeline, and it was useless in the deep ravine. This is the moment that defines Michael Murphy. The moment that separates a leader from a hero. The team was pinned down in the ravine. They were taking effective fire from multiple directions. Dietz was fading fast, his wounds critical. Axelson was fighting with a catastrophic head injury. Luttrell was barely able to walk. Murphy himself was bleeding from his stomach wound. They had tried repeatedly to make radio contact with the Operations Center, TOC, at Bagram, but the rugged terrain blocked the line of sight signal. They were completely cut off. No one knew they were in trouble. No one was coming to help. Murphy knew that if they stayed in the ravine, they would all die. The only way to get a signal out, to call for help, to save what was left of his team, was to move to higher ground. But the high ground was completely exposed, a kill zone swept by intense enemy fire. It was a death sentence, and Murphy knew it. He looked at his men. He saw their injuries, their exhaustion, their unwavering determination. He knew he was the only one who could make the move. Without hesitation, without a word of complaint or fear, Lieutenant Michael Murphy made his choice. He didn't order one of his men to do it. He didn't try to find another way. He simply did what had to be done. He left his position of relative cover and began to climb. He climbed out of the ravine, up the exposed slope, moving directly into the teeth of the enemy fire. The Taliban fighters saw him instantly. A lone figure, silhouetted against the sky. They poured everything they had at him. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet, cracked past his head. He reached a small outcrop of rock on the high ground. It offered minimal cover, but it was high enough. He pulled out his satellite phone. He knew he was a sitting duck. As he dialed the number for the TOC, a bullet struck him in the back, shattering his spine. The impact was devastating. He was knocked forward, dropping the phone and his rifle. June 28, 2005. The Hindu Kush Mountains, Kuna Province, Afghanistan. A place where the earth reaches up to tear at the sky. It is a landscape of brutal ancient beauty, jagged peaks soaring past 10,000 feet, deep, shadowed valleys, and steep, shale-covered slopes that punish every step. It is a terrain that has swallowed empires for millennia. 4 men, weighted down by heavy packs and the lethal tools of their trade, move through the pre-dawn darkness. They are the tip of the spear. The best of the best. U.S. Navy SEALs. Lieutenant Michael Murphy, Sonar Technician 2nd Class Matthew Axelson, Gunner's Mate 2nd Class Danny Dietz, and Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Marcus Luttrell. Their mission, codenamed Operation Red Wings, is a textbook reconnaissance task. Insert deep into enemy-held territory, locate a high-value target, a mid-level Taliban commander named Ahmad Shah, known for his ruthlessness and ties to foreign fighters, and call in the larger strike force to eliminate him. They are ghosts in the mountains, trained to be invisible, to observe without being seen, to strike and vanish. They have infiltrated the Satalo Sar mountain range, positioning themselves on a high ridge overlooking the village where Shah is believed to be hiding. They are confident, skilled, and bound by a brotherhood forged in the crucible of BUD/S, basic underwater demolition/SEAL, training, a bond stronger than blood. But the mountains have eyes, and the fog of war is about to descend with a blinding, catastrophic suddenness. In a matter of hours, these 4 elite warriors will be fighting for their lives against an overwhelming force of Taliban fighters. Their meticulously planned mission will unravel into a chaotic, brutal fight for survival. And at the breaking point, when all hope seems lost, their leader, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, will make a choice that defines the very essence of heroism. A choice that will cost him everything. This is not a story of a flawless operation or a glorious victory. It is a story of Murphy's Law in its most lethal form, of the brutal realities of asymmetric warfare, and of the unbreakable code of the Navy SEAL Brotherhood. It is the story of the final call on the mountain. To understand the gravity of the situation on Satalo Sar, one must first understand the men and the mission. Operation Red Wings was conceived in the dusty command outposts of Bugram Airfield. Intelligence reports indicated that Ahmad Shah and his militia, known as the Mountain Tigers, were using the Kunar province as a staging ground for attacks against coalition forces. Shah was a key destabilizing figure, a local warlord with global aspirations, aided by anti-coalition militia fighters and foreign jihadists. Neutralizing him would disrupt a major IED, improvised explosive device, cell and deal a significant blow to the insurgency in the region. The plan was complex, involving multiple phases. The first phase, the reconnaissance, was assigned to a 4-man SEAL Special Reconnaissance Team from SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1, SDVT-1, based out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Their objective was to positively identify Shah, confirm his location, and provide eyes-on for the direct action phase, which would be carried out by a larger force of Marines and other SEALs. The team leader was Lieutenant Michael Murphy, 29, from Patchogue, New York. Murph, as he was known, was a natural leader. A graduate of Penn State with degrees in political science and psychology, he had turned down offers from several law schools to enlist in the Navy. He was smart, fiercely loyal, and possessed a quiet, unshakable moral compass. He was the kind of officer who led from the front, who earned respect not by his rank, but by his actions. His men would follow him anywhere. Matthew Axelson, 29, from Cupertino, California, was the team's lead sniper. Tall, quiet, and intensely focused, Axe was the epitome of a quiet professional. He was known for his surgical precision with a rifle and his unflappable calm under pressure. He was the team's steady hand, the eyes that missed nothing. Danny Dietz, 25, from Littleton, Colorado, was the team's communications specialist. Stocky, strong, and deeply artistic, Danny was the team's lifeline to the outside world. He carried the heavy and PRC 117 tactical radio, responsible for maintaining the critical link with the operations center. He was a man of few words, but his dedication to his teammates was absolute. Marcus Luttrell, 29, from Huntsville, Texas, was the team's medic and a sniper. A large, powerful man with a deep, resonant voice, Marcus was a country boy with a warrior's heart. He had a unique bond with Axe, the two of them often acting as the team's synchronized sniper pair. These 4 men were more than just a team, they were a family. They trained together, lived together, and understood each other without speaking. They knew the risks of their profession, accepted them, and embraced the challenge. They were prepared for anything, or so they thought. The insertion, by helicopter under the cover of darkness on the night of June 27th, had not gone perfectly. The intended landing zone was compromised, forcing the pilots to drop the team at an alternate, less ideal location, miles from their target observation post. This meant a grueling, exhausting hike through the steep, treacherous terrain, carrying gear that weighed over 100 pounds per man. By the time they reached their initial position on a ridge overlooking the village, the sun was already up, and they were already fighting fatigue. They settled into their observation post, camouflaging themselves amidst the rocks and scrub brush. The waiting began. The hours ticked by, the sun beating down on their positions. They scanned the village below, looking for any sign of Shah or his fighters. The isolation was absolute. The radio communications, due to the rugged mountainous terrain blocking the line-of-sight signals, were spotty at best. They were dangerously cut off. Then, around noon on June 28th, the unimaginable happened. The kind of random, chaotic event that no amount of planning can account for. A soft rustling of rocks. The bleating of animals. 3 local goat herders, an old man and 2 teenage boys, stumbled directly onto the SEALs' hidden position. They were unarmed civilians. But in the context of an insurgency, the line between civilian and combatant is terrifyingly blurred. Murphy made a quick decision. They couldn't let the herders go. They would almost certainly alert the Taliban. But they couldn't kill them. They were unarmed non-combatants, and such an act would be a violation of the rules of engagement and a moral line that Murphy, a man of deep integrity, refused to cross. It was an impossible moral dilemma, a moment that Luttrell would later describe as the hardest decision of their lives. The team debated their options. Tie them up and leave them? They would likely die of exposure or be eaten by wild animals. Kill them and bury the bodies? It would ensure the mission's secrecy, but it would be a war crime, a stain on their souls. Ultimately, Murphy made the call. He decided to uphold the rules of engagement and his own moral code. He ordered the herders released. He knew the risks. He knew it was likely a death sentence for his team. But he chose honor over expediency.